Hello and welcome to another unfair fight. This time it is Nathan challenging me with something that is supposed to be hard for my young earth beliefs. So Nathan, I'll let you take it away and tell us what the topic is.
Yes, well, welcome to Unfair Fights. A few months ago, I read an article and I thought, this is checkmate. It connects uh, cosmological things with evolution. And I often find that, there's a little bit of schizophrenia going on with these young Earth creationists. They'll talk about Big Bang or they'll talk about evolution separately, or maybe sometimes people believe one and not the other. And so I thought, okay, this thing connects both. So I'm going to go after her with this. And basically, I'm trying to connect. This paper, says you can connect, supernovas basic in, cosmological time scale with viruses in an African lake. So um, I'm going to go ahead and share this PowerPoint presentation here, or not PowerPoint, but you know what I'm saying. It's these slides. So, cichlids in Lake Tan Tanganyika. Sorry if the name, I did the name wrong. So this is an African rift lake, and I think it holds like a huge amount of fresh water. I mean, you look at this picture, it looks like an ocean or sea, but it's actually a freshwater lake. That's a very beautiful picture from the like Tanzania. Come visit Tanzania with this wonderful boat. I don't know if the boats all look like that, but anyway. And we have these different species of fish. Now, these are all cichlids. Okay, these are one of the most common types of fish in the world. There's like 1,700 scientifically studied species of this fish, and these particular lakes, this one and two others in Africa, are intensely studied by evolutionists because of the diversity and the differentiation and speciation of this fish. And so let me just go to the next slide here. Next slide, please. Next slide. There we go. All right. And so we're also in this, talking about connecting this to some cosmological thing. And the way that that's connected is there's an isotope of iron. Now, an isotope of iron, iron 60, is not created here on Earth. It's created in space. And this is a slab of the Pacific crust taken from 4,800 meters underneath the ocean. And this cosmic dust has settled over time. And as you can see in that chart, there are layers of this crust that they've sent through Whirlywig Gizmo, and detected this radioactive isotope of iron in abundance in a certain part of this slab. So if Rebekah is successful with her, young Earth creation hypothesis, then I think that she'd be able to explain, number one, the differentiation of the fish in the lake, this slab of iron, or the slab of crust from the ocean bottom, and also viruses. So we're really going all over the place today, but these are clades of one particular virus, and this there's a lot of information about all these different viruses, but this is one in particular, and this is how it has changed over time. And you might have to get your bifocals on to look at all of these, but anyway, these are different types of fish, and the virus affects different ones from these different speciations of fish in Lake Tanganyika. Now, I want to be fair, so I'm going to give Rebekah a little bit more information that she might use to build her argument. Okay, so there are 240 endemic species arranged into 12 phylogenetic subclades in this lake. 240. Let's see, these cichlids dominate most of the lakes, fish habitats covering multiple trophic levels, which is depths, and show extraordinary diversity of habitat use and morphological features. Okay, so they look very different. They might have different scales. They might have different whatever morphological features. All right. Despite their phenotypic diversity, that's what they display on their surface. African cichlids exhibit lower levels of genetic diversity than most non-radiating, and that means that radiating, they don't mean like electromagnetic radiation. It's radiating in that they spread to all of these different places. Non-radiating vertebrate populations and many alleles. These are the two chromosomes or whatever. Are shared among species from different lakes, as well as between those with strikingly different morphologies, body sizes, and ecologies. So even though they have a lot of different phenotypes, different morphologies, a lot of their genetic material is the same. Okay, so Rebekah, you tell me, how do we get all of these fishes and everything like that in such a short time scale? What is the time scale for you?
Hilarious, because right now I don't hear anything that is a problem to explain by young Earth beliefs, right? I mean, varieties of fish in a lake, okay, no problem there. You know, the variety of viruses in a lake, not really that surprising. And so I'm not really sure what I need to argue here, but I do want to ask some questions, and I will pick on one thing that you said. But let me just lay it out. I think, okay, it sounds like an interesting lake. Cool, awesome. There's lots of places in the world where we see a diversity of species, and we don't need a supernova to explain it. Okay, so I mean, it's very natural to have genetic variation, and it's also very natural to have morphological features that are different in organisms that have similar genetic code, because we have gene regulatory networks that actually choose what is going to be expressed. And so you can have all the genes for something in a creature, and then in one of those creatures, the gene regulatory network will choose to express that gene, and in another one it won't. And and some connect that to, this is the way that uh, organisms adapt in their environment. So it actually works. This proposal works a lot faster than natural selection would, using what's already in the genome and adapting. The creature is able to actually adapt according to what it needs in its environment from what's already there. So I don't have a problem with any of this, except, well, I have a problem with the story that's being told, the evolutionary story which is being told. First thing I'm going to pick on is, you said this type of iron is not found. And by the way, another thing I don't have a problem with is a layer of sediment that has an iron isotope in it. Okay. But you said this type of iron, it's not made here on Earth. Okay. Now, this exposes an evolutionary assumption, because according to evolutionary assumptions, we're all made in the stars. You see, we all had to come from stardust. Basically, where all the chemicals up through iron are made in the supernova, right? So,
Real quick,
okay.
Okay, keep going.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you know this iron isotope is not formed on Earth?
Well, I want to. I'll get to that in a second. It's the quantity of it. I'll get to that in a second. But I would like to rewind a little bit, because you're picking on my worldview, but you haven't built your own. So how old is this lake in your mind with these fish in it? How old is it?
It may have it's been around probably since the beginning, and I mean, it may have been formed into a lake after the flood, but I
Okay.
mean, the
And
so
how old is that? How old is that?
uh probably about 5,000 years ago.
Okay. So
Right.
5,000 years, and were all of these fish present in these different species at the beginning, or did they become different species in 5,000 years?
Well, I'm sure that they have probably changed and expressed themselves differently in 5,000 years. But if you notice, I mean, I would say they're still fish. So there's lots of potential for change within organisms and even to diversify to the point where two things could be called a different species because maybe they can't interbreed anymore, something like that. And we see that with like dog breeds. So I don't know. You can tell me if you know anything about these fish. Do some of them are they unable to interbreed? If so, then they may have gotten to the point genetically with their reproduction and things where they can no longer some of them can no longer reproduce. So there may have been changes within the fish, but so I can't really say like what it looked like 5,000 years ago with these fish. But is that
Oh,
yeah.
so if there's 1,700 species of this fish and 240 in this particular lake, are you saying that the ones in the lake were one fish and the ones outside were one fish at some point and they were all the same fish? Or are you saying that there are different fishes that were made at the beginning?
You mean at the beginning of creation?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, or creation or the
I
flood.
don't
This I'm
think
trying
God
to.
made just one fish or two
Okay.
fish, okay?
Or
There
one
was
type of fish. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
there was a lot of different types of fish in the beginning, and I can't speak about whether this lake came about with one type of fish that diversified, and so, I really don't know, but you're saying they're all cichlids, right?
Yes, cichlids or
Cichlids,
yeah.
okay.
And this is a very common fish, tilapia and things like that. These fish are this family of fish is found in the Caribbean, Saudi, Middle East, and in Africa. So they're very widespread. But these fish here, there's 240 different types in this lake. And well, let's go to this one real quick. So to address your concern about this, so iron 60 decays over time. It's radioactive, and the you see all these dots on this plot. These are the different layers of this sample, and basically they're taking a few millimeters at a time and running it through, and you see these black dots most of the time when they're passing through these layers slowly and testing it, they see very low levels of iron 60. And so there should be some iron 60 left over from the creation of the world, but there's an excess of iron 60 at certain layers. And so that's what I'm asking you to explain. How do you have most of this slab uh, and it's some level of iron 60, and then one particular or three particular, it looks like, slabs that are more radioactive than the other ones. And although this is just one slab from the Pacific, they have taken slabs from the Indian Ocean, and we also have seen iron 60 in ice in Antarctica. So we know that it's still being deposited on our planet to this day. It's just the amount that's being deposited on our planet from space.
Okay, so what is the proposal about the age of this iron?
So the proposal about the age of this iron from the old Earth evolutionists is that this excess here is from supernova explosions inside of the what created the local bubble. So we exist in a bubble of space that has less gas and dust than the rest of space. And cosmologists or astrophysicists, I guess, believe that this used to be an area that had a lot of blue stars that exploded and pushed out this region. So I've got a picture here of one of them that's still in the process of doing that. So you can see you have blue stars. The blue stars burn very fast and hot, and then they explode. And that we have entered the local bubble at some six they think about was it 6 million to 8 million years ago. Our Earth, because it's traveling at a different speed around the galaxy than these clusters, has entered a space in there. And so they're trying the scientists are trying to connect some sort of explosion, and that's what you see on the right hand side. These are different clusters of stars, and basically things in the galaxy. And these bars are when they think they would have been active, having active supernovas. And they're trying to determine which of these groups of stars they think may have impacted this iron excess at that time in that rock. Okay, so back to you. So this.
Oh, wait,
Uh,
hold on.
oh,
You have an unfair friend here.
oh,
Oh,
great.
good. It's Dr. Joel. This should be your best friend because
Oh, all right, Dr. Joel, thank you. You're a lifeline. Thank you so much.
so this is I want to put us up here so we can read this and not have it blocked. But so now this is kind of going back to the fish stuff. So he says, thing is, there are 1,700 plus living species of cichlids. Is that what it is? And their fossil record only exists in post-flood rocks. They are very young. If God created a great diversity of cichlids, they were not preserved in the flood, he says. Okay, now this gets really interesting because Dr. Joel is kind of a professional young earth creation debunker.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
So he actually knows more about young earth creation than I do. Okay. But what
Seems
he
like an
has
unfair friend. I have an unfair friend.
said, so this makes it, yeah, this is actually perfect because I'm really happy to have his expertise here. But and even to represent the young earth view. However, there is some arguments about where the post-flood boundary is in the rocks. So I need to try to understand his comment here. So so he's saying these only live, their fossil record only exists in post-flood rocks. They are very young. Okay. So basically he's trying to say we don't have any record of these before. So basically, it's a new species, which actually I'm pretty fine with. Like I said, I feel like there's a lot of potential for genetic diversity, and like we could probably go back to the flood, and we're not going to find a poodle, right? Because and it's not that poodles didn't have the potential to exist, but they probably their potential hadn't been expressed. So it's very possible that these fish, that there's no record of them in the fossil record because they didn't really exist. That doesn't mean their potential didn't exist within the genetic variation that was present in fish already. And then also there's another possibility, which is they could have existed and they just weren't preserved in the fossil record like lots of other organisms that we have no record of in the fossil record. So I don't think that just being absent is a, you know, says that they weren't there. But either way, I don't really think this is a problem for my view.
Well, if they're young, here's the question. If they're young, all right, we have 1,700 of them. And if the young Earth creationists are saying, okay, these are after flood rocks. Okay, so they've speciated since then. All right. If you only have 5,000 years, then that means that on average you have what? I mean, one every 3 years, a different color scheme, morphology, all of that stuff. I mean, do you think that that's plausible?
Yeah, what's the problem? Okay, so Dr. Joel chimes in and says, yes, I should clarify they are less than 65 million years old, so they are post-flood for AIG, but not ICR. Thank you. Okay, so
all right,
wait.
I'm guessing these are like, yeah, go ahead.
No, but okay, so you're saying, and I'm saying there's no problem with that, because that is actually what we see happening in a lot of cases. Like, okay, I'll give two examples that have been used as examples of evolution when they really aren't, and it's a quick change in the morphology of a creature. Like, and maybe I'll just give one because time's sake. They said these lizards, there were these lizards that they took off this island, and I think they were eating meat, and then they put them and they had them eat plants, and they developed a new valve. They developed a cecal valve in their digestive system that helped them digest the plants. And so this was touted as, look, it's evolution in action. Okay, now, but what was really interesting is when they took those same lizards and they put them back on their old diet, that cecal valve disappeared. So that showed it was already it was already present within its genetic, it was had the ability to grow that. And so, and that's a huge change in morphology in within the lifetime of the creature. So I have no problem with big changes within things like that are already a potential, right?
Okay.
Like, so
Okay.
that's my explanation.
Fair enough, but let's get back to this ancient rock here.
Okay.
So how do you explain this excess of iron 60 in this particular layer of this rock that's been, sitting at the
Uh-oh, you're
bottom of the
frozen.
ocean?
Wait, hold on. You
Am I
froze
back?
up. You froze up. I couldn't hear
Oh
you.
no.
How do I
Oh no.
explain
Okay.
iron and what?
How do you explain this tiny strip, this little tiny layer of iron 60 in this rock from the bottom of the ocean? And like I said, they've taken them from multiple oceans. So you have multiple oceans and you have this tiny layer of rock that has an excess of iron 60, which, where does that come from? How did that get there?
Well, I mean, that's what I'm challenging this supernova view, which I want to get to that because I think there's a major problem with this supernova stuff. But how I've asked you now, how old are they saying this is? And
They're
then
saying
I
they're
want to know,
2 million years old.
okay, and
Yeah.
how are they getting that? What is the
Okay.
process? What is the dating method?
Yes. All right. So they have differences in beryllium-10 that they use to date the different layers. And so the ratio between this beryllium 10 and the other elements, beryllium 9, or the other isotope, beryllium 9, gives you a ratio that tells you, how old the rock is. But so for them, they've got kind of this method they're using to date the different layers, and then they figure out, okay, it's because it's this, we think it's this old, and they can tell that it's growing by about 2.8 millimeters per million years on the bottom of the ocean, from things accreting. So they've got that, and then the iron, which again is not, this other isotope is not the same as what would be expected from Earth. But even if you say it's from Earth, as a young Earth creationist, you would have to explain how this iron, which is only different from normal iron by one, by a neutron in weight. How did it get deposited in the flood, if that's when you think it was, or was it created that way? Did God create it with this little spice in there to fool everybody about this radioactive isotope in there?
Well, I will have to say I don't know, okay, on this, because I haven't looked into this dating method, but I do know a lot of the dating methods that are proposed do have problems with them. And I would like to know, did they do any other dating methods on this? Because and also this is a sedimentary layer, right? Is this
I
a
guess, yeah, I
sediment-
guess
Okay, this
it's
is a sedimentary rock. So I don't even know that we can do as my understanding, we can only do radioisotope dating on igneous rocks, not sedimentary rocks. So I have no idea about what's going on with this. So, I mean,
okay. Well,
yeah,
interesting. So I'll kind of proceed with the old Earth, and you
okay.
can poke holes at it. So interestingly, what they have found, if you look at this one has the ages blanked out, but if I go a little bit forward, well, I thought I had one that had the ages put back in. So this one is, this has the different species of fish. I think it's phylogenetic tree, and we've got the dates. And as you can see, at about 2.5 million years, you have a wide diversification that happens. And so the interesting thing about this supernova hypothesis is that they have evidence that the Earth was subjected to iron particles that were created, and that's just the trace element that they're using, right? But that the Earth was exposed to these elements coming from these supernova explosions at a certain period of time. Now, one of them may have been around 6 million years ago when the Earth entered this local bubble, because it would have gone kind of through the aftershock. And another one, 2.5 million years ago, could have been a more recent supernova explosion, the shock wave of which, first there would be light, but over time, these particles that are traveling at high speeds would interact with our solar system. And so what's interesting is that the burst of virus identity, that they've, figured out based on, they think, the number of proteins that change over time and that kind of thing, and the species of these fish seems to have exploded at the same time that we were subjected to this radiation from space. So that's the tie-in between the cosmology, which is, I don't know how young Earth people, we already talked about light and all that, but there is a history of the Earth passing through the different stars and everything like that. And here we see an impact of that on the biological record, on the evolution of species. So how do you deal with both of these, Rebekah?
Well, first of all, because they're using their assumption about all of this to assume there was a supernova. Like, was there any other evidence for the supernova besides fish infected by viruses? And then they look for iron and they find it and they
No, they found the
assume,
iron. They found the
okay,
iron. I mean,
but
they
they
found the
found the
iron, and
iron. But that has an assumption too, which is if it's this iron, it comes from the supernova, right? So how did they rule out iron on being present on Earth?
Well, like I said, the other parts of that don't have the same amount of iron,
Wait, but
right?
hold
The
up.
same
Look,
amount of iron 60.
it is my understanding that our core, the inner core of the earth, is made of a lot of iron, right? So how do they know this isn't iron from a volcano that, you know, exploded and then, you know, the sediments were transformed? Like, how are they ruling out the
Yeah,
earth
I,
explanation?
I think that's a great question, but it's the enrichment of iron 60 that's the issue. So if the rest of that is probably iron from the earth, right? And it's all a certain level of radioactivity. That's a remnant of the Earth's own creation, from elements that were either ejected by, I don't know, neutron stars or supernova or whatever. But it has a certain concentration of radioactivity, and it's losing it over time. And this is newer; it's newer material from the universe. It's really young in terms of geologic time. It's just a few million years old. And so, yeah, there's different lines of evidence. One is that we exist in this local bubble. That is an evolution of one of these OB, oxygen blue star clusters exploding. There's different morphology with that as well, and simulations taking us back. There's the speed of the Earth going through the galaxy comparative to these things, and so they know that if you go back in time tracking the Earth's progress through this thing, we probably entered this local bubble about 6 million years ago, 6 to 8 million years ago. And so what's interesting to me is that something that happened on a cosmos, you know, uh, out in space seems to have impacted the evolution of life on Earth. And I don't think you have a good explanation. I think people would have a hard time coming up with an explanation for this iron excess in these uh, ocean rocks.
Now, are you saying definitively iron 60 cannot, now putting aside the idea that only iron only comes from supernova, because I completely reject that. But are you saying there's a way we can know that there's no other iron 60 on Earth except something that came from space?
Well, okay, there's in Antarctic ice now they have found the same iron 60.
How does
So
that
so
tell
it's
me
still
whether
it's
the
still
source
collecting on
is
our
Earth
Earth.
or space?
Well, yeah, but I mean, so you don't think any dust is coming from space?
No, I think there is. Yes, there's lots of stuff coming from space. I'm not ruling that out, but I will tell you this. This is what I notice about this story. It's very cockamamie. They, and Nathan did send me the article and wanted me to read the article so that I would understand the thing. Okay, so I did read the article. And the article, it's like there's like, oh, why are there so many viruses here? Let's look for any. Then they look for iron, and then they're like, oh, wait, maybe this came from space. And then they use the assumption coming from this iron to build this whole idea, this entire story about the supernova. Okay. And so right now, you've got a story. Now, it could be true. I don't think it's true because it doesn't fit in with my worldview, and it's quite cockamamie, if you ask me. I didn't see any other of anything else presented as evidence for the supernova. All I saw was that they did this entire simulation based on the idea of this. They needed to get the iron down into these sediments, right? So then they thought maybe there was a supernova. They ran a simulation on a computer to see if they could make the super Earth pass through a supernova bubble in these intervals, and voila, they were able to do it. Okay, so there's very little actual evidence connecting this. We don't even know that these supernova happened. So right now we're believing that two supernova happened and Earth passed through it. Why? Only because We dug in an ocean floor, got a sediment, and there was some iron 60 in it. Now, that is why I'm picking on the iron 60 thing, and I don't want to let this go, because my suspicion is that this is based on the assumption of, oh, we're all stardust, all the elements were created in the stars in supernova, and that is a mantra that is taught to people, right? And actually, this should already speak against the evolutionary old earth universe, because you know what, we cannot get past iron in fusion to make all the other elements. So you already know the elements should be coming from somewhere else. So I'm not going to assume that iron 60 wasn't already present on Earth when God created it. And this difference between the beryllium or whatever difference in amount of the isotope, I don't know what that's from, but I'm not going to assume it came from a supernova based on this evidence.
Well, okay, great. We have another Dr. Joel. Thank you, Joel, Dr. Joel Duff.
Okay, he says maybe another way of thinking about it is that there is a spike in this form of iron layers in rocks that are clearly post-flood. So where did it come from in the post-flood world?
Thank you. Very good. Very succinct. Because this is the problem. You're poking holes at the old Earth, evolution theory, and I agree that it's like this person is putting forward a hypothesis that was connecting different pieces of information in a unique way. So I think that it isn't proven what this person is hypothesizing, but it's part of a grander narrative. And the problem I have is, you can poke holes at this, the science, are you, like pointing holes at, where the dragons are or whatever on the map still. But if you're going to upend that completely, you have to put forward something else that makes sense of all the data, of all the evidence. So where in this post-flood world, where did this iron 60 come from?
Well, I haven't done any research on iron 60. Okay, so I don't know. But I mean, off the top of my head, like I said, maybe it came from a volcano. There's lots of iron in the inner workings of the earth. So I wouldn't be surprised if a volcano could produce iron 60, right? So I don't know. That's my proposal right now.
Okay, I do want to say, that in researching this, and originally this was about viruses, and the viruses, they have found most of them are in this lower jaw or in the lungs of these fish in this lake, and so and it is still crossing over species, these viruses. So for me personally, I do think that that's very interesting because of my virus theory, my world according to Nathan. But one, I did find it difficult. I did find, in all honesty, some what I feel like is circular reasoning in these papers, and maybe that's just because the scientists have not fleshed out the theory fully or whatever. One active area of investigation is how long would it take these iron particles to travel from a supernova to the Earth, or at what speed would it be passing through space? And also, I do find that these phylogenetic trees, the time calibration that's required for them, it's really hard in the literature to figure out what exactly they're doing. And so it was kind of endless for me trying to figure out exactly how they're time calibrating these things. And I do agree with you. At one point when I was reading some of these articles, they were talking about using the software and the modeling software. And I'm not saying that that software is wrong, but I do think it's a little bit of a black box. And so you have specialists leaning on the expertise of other specialists who are creating the software in order to come up with their time scales. And I think part of the problem is that these articles, they do assume the time because they're not making this article to try and debunk, young Earth creationism. They're trying to make an addition to an already existing theory and take it one step further. And so I was having trouble figuring out how they were getting the time calibration for this lake. Um, and it could be that, they already have in other literature a time span that people have figured out on when when this plate was starting to break apart and so formed this freshwater lake in Africa, which would be kind of the beginning of this. But I do admit that it was difficult to figure out how they were getting these millions of years, the specifics of the millions of years.
Well, thank you for admitting that, Nathan. And actually, I want to put up good. Before we move on to the next topic related to this, let's finish off with Dr. Joel's comment here. And by the way, if you guys don't know Dr. Joel Duff, please do subscribe to his channel if this kind of content is interesting for you, and he is mostly looking at young Earth stuff and arguing against it. So, I watch his channel a lot because I like to see what the arguments against young Earth are. So he says, I don't think we have any evidence of iron 60 coming from any volcanoes, and we have thousands of volcanic ash layers that have been studied. So I don't know about iron 60 in any of them. That is something I will look up after we do this, finish this video and stuff. Like, I will look that up this week and find out, like, what am I missing on this? Is this really good evidence that this came from space? And so thank you, Dr. Joel, for sharing that.
And I'll just say one thing, Rebekah, if you want to do an atomic genesis, feel free to try and ambush me with that. I would love to talk about that. So, things heavier than iron. But anyway, go ahead.
Oh, really?
Oh,
You
I would love to.
You have some theories? You think you got it figured out?
Well, just go ahead and try and ambush me if you want to use that one. I mean, I would love to stay in space. I mean, this evolution stuff is, it's a whole new world. I was, learning all about viruses, and it was just, it was mind-boggling.
Okay, speaking of that, now this is another part of this article I want to pick on, because it was like, okay, we wanted to know why these species are so diverse, and they said we know that radiation breaks DNA. And so I loved the way they actually phrased it, because isn't it true when we do? And so they think this is like, okay, we need to find some radiation so that we can get these animals to mutate and change themselves up. But what is hilarious about the phrasing is that it is all too true that radiation breaks DNA, and not in a good way, folks. It doesn't break it in a way where it's going to like produce something beautiful. No, when we give radiation to fruit flies, what do we get? We get dead fruit flies or horribly mutated fruit flies. We don't produce beautiful variations by bombarding something with radiation. So even the whole idea that like connecting radiation from a supernova, which the only thing I'm challenging there is the time scale, right? Obviously, I don't think we've been around for millions of years, but I'm fine with the idea of radiation coming from space. It obviously does. We're getting bombarded with stuff from space all the time. But anyway, what is the point I'm trying to make? That it's very strange to connect this, to look for a way of making animals change and to seek that from radiation in space. So what do you have to say about that, Nathan?
I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think one of the great things about people talking about young Earth creationism and all of that is that it is challenging scientists to think, at least hopefully, to think in different ways. And so one of the things that I thought you were going to jump on is that the genetic diversity of these fish has actually gone down, and you might expect that with differentiation it would go up. And I did also see that they said the authors of that article thought that it was actually the radiation that was causing the differentiation. And I think it is indirectly. But, in the world according to Nathan, I actually think that, again, I don't know if this is a prevailing scientific theory, but I actually think that the genome builds up in times of stability. So when I was researching viruses, and they were doing transcriptome RNA sequencing, and they did billions of these. They did 23.7 billion RNA sequencing reads of these fish with six each, at least six each of each species. And so for me, what's interesting is I believe that you have these different viruses and they have different ways of getting the body to transcribe their proteins. But in eukaryotes, it all has to do with somehow it gets in the nucleus and plays a trick. And so these virus DNA strands are either, some of them are double stranded, but a lot of them are single stranded, and it requires a double strand in order to create mRNA, which then can be, create proteins. And so they all use the body's own machinery to kind of trick it and incorporate it into the genome on some level. And so for me, I believe that viruses actually build up the genomes during times of stability. And then when there's a time of stress, like for instance, these supernova explosions, you have a lot of dying off and you have, virus proliferation in this case. But you have these, fish that they're dying off, and so they're having to breed with each other, and so they actually lose genetic material, and so a lot of these things come to light, that have been kind of hidden in the genome, and that changes the morphology. And so I do agree with young Earth creationists in that there could, in a way, have been a big genome that then gets pared down in times of stress because of interbreeding and things like that. And then that causes new morphologies which allow survival and allow, so my method of mutation is a little bit different, I think, maybe than the prevailing theory. But I thought you were going to jump on that the genetic material actually went down as the species went up. The speciation went up, which I thought was very interesting in this case. So for me, I don't think that it's the cosmic rays that are breaking the DNA strands in the reproductive cells that's causing the speciation. I actually think it's the interbreeding that comes afterwards, after they've already had their genome built up by all of these viruses and things. That's my thinking. And the sharing of genetic material.
Now, why couldn't it be just breeding with the genetic material that's already present, like that causes the variation? Like,
Well, in a way, that's what I'm saying. I'm
okay,
agreeing. Like, let's take the lake.
you're just
Okay.
adding in the viruses, but oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, so you have a lake, you have a fish that has a lot of genetic material already packed in there, and then and that has already been built up over time during a period of stability from various viruses. Then when this catastrophe happens, you have a wide range, maybe becoming maybe not in this species, but in another one, a wide range becoming isolated groups of individuals of that species that then have to interbreed with each other. And because you have these two alleles that, maybe you had allele diversity, but suddenly you have all the same allele from interbreeding, it causes other parts of the genome that would normally be hidden to come to light. And so you end up with these different morphological features. And I think that that's kind of what the creationists are also saying. But for me, it's not that these things were created, it's that they, even if you had a paring down over time at these moments of crisis, that stuff was all put there, in the genome over time, large time scales. So that's
Okay, well,
that's the world
okay,
according to Nate.
Well, actually, what you're saying right now kind of ties into our topic for next week that I'm going to ambush you with. But do you have anything further that you want to say about this? Like, did you have any other slides or anything you wanted to share before I share the next topic?
Well, I just do. I mean, I don't need to. No, I do think the iron is a problem for young Earth creationists, and I would love to see some sort of explanation of that.
Okay, well, and for those watching, if I find a good explanation, I will put it in the description below later. If I don't find a good explanation, then I'll put that I didn't find a good explanation in the description, okay? But give me a few days. So check back in a few days and see if I found something. And let's just put up one more comment from Dr. Joel and before I present the new topic. So hold on. He says, by the way, people that live where there is high natural radiation from uranium have less radiation damage. That's really interesting. They have elevated mutation repair mechanisms, which more than compensate. That's really interesting. I haven't heard that before, but I would like to maybe look into that.
My
Jamie
biology
Russell
teacher
is
did
here.
a. Sorry, go ahead.
And Jamie Russell says viruses can't turn cows into whales. I completely agree with that. Thank you, Jamie Russell. And congratulations to Jamie, because Jamie is just got engaged this weekend. And so I'm very happy for him. So congratulations, Jamie. So, okay, now let's just, I'm going to put up my little slide here that it will introduce my topic for next week. This is what Nathan's going to have to deal with. Now, for those watching old enough to remember the Where's the Beef commercials, I want to know where's the beef with evolution, okay? Because these are the mechanisms that I've heard that are supposed to be the mechanisms that allow the diversity of life to develop on Earth. And all of these mechanisms, except for one, really can't produce new information, right? They are only combining, maybe they can combine information, they can trade information, but where do these genomes come from? Okay, and I'm going to grant you a starting single cell to work with because people are very fond of separating this event of this mythological event of abiogenesis from evolution, right? And I would too if I had the difficulty of trying to get a cell to arise by chance. I definitely want to separate that from my theory, but because people like to separate that, I'll just go ahead and grant you that one little cell. And I'd like to know where we got all of the genes that exist on Earth today. And, from these mechanisms, natural selection can only select from what's already there. Genetic drift can only work with what's already present. Gene flow can only work with what's already present in the genes. Horizontal gene transfer is already still working with what's already present in the genes. And you can trade and maybe you can get a little more, but where did that come from? So the symbiogenesis, okay, maybe you can combine and then you'll have a bigger genome, but where did those genes come from? And so the only proposed mechanism that can actually add new information is the wrong kind of stuff that we don't want. We have mutations they're mostly degrading everything. This is going in the wrong direction. So where is the beef? When do we actually get to see evolution beefing things up, making all these genomes? That's what I want to know. So that's what your topic is to think about next week. And I don't think you can do it with your viruses, Nathan. I know you're fond of these, but
Oh, you
I've
you
underestimated
underestimate.
your ability to make viruses make all of life on Earth.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's all, but I'm glad because doing all this virus work last week, I do have some ideas about this. But we'll see. I mean, it'll be interesting.
Okay, so that's the topic for next week. Where's the evolutionary beef? When do we get to see stuff being built up by evolution? So, thank you everybody for watching. Really appreciate your support and participation as we're getting this started. Every viewer is very important to us, and we want to make this a really good show that will be informative and helpful for people, and also hopefully just make a good conversation about origins that, you know, will be friendly conversation and help us all talk out difficult ideas to help us get to the truth, because really we want to get to the truth about reality. So we appreciate, especially people that are, have expertise in this area, like Dr. Joel. Thank you for stopping by. And so
Yes,
please do
thank you.
subscribe to his channel, and everybody have a good night, and we'll see you next week. Do you want to say anything, Nathan?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you. Bye.